I think that people want all the power and attention on one group and not the other group, because if another person gets more attention than them, then they will have to get the attention back, and they want the attention to be all on them.
Whoa, I mean, I feel like you should just drop your mic, but don't drop the mic, right? They want the attention, and another word for attention is power. They want all the power. In psychology and adult education, we call this scarcity mindset, where we think if someone else is getting something, it means that I'm not getting enough. So we talk about America being as a pie, and you want one slice of the pie. We think someone is holding the pie, and I own this pie, and I'm going to give you one little sliver, but I can't give you too much because then it's going to take away from what I have. And what we're saying is there's enough pie for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to Living in 3D Power. Discover your truth, discern your path, determine your power. I'm Dr. Amber Sessoms, and together, let's unlock our power, build authentic connections, and foster collective liberation. Hey y'all, welcome to episode 6 of Living in 3D Power, and today we're going to be focusing on Emma's 4th strength from the VIA survey, which is fairness. And I want to just quickly touch upon what VIA defines fairness to be and how this is leading to the current moment with DEI attacks. So what they say is fairness is treating all people the same according to notions of fairness and justice. And how they define justice is advocating for equality. Now that word equality is going to be important in a moment. They also say not letting feelings, biased decisions about others, giving everyone a fair chance. So when you're thinking about fairness, it's more than just treating people equally. We know that if we say everyone gets the same thing in this world, that doesn't really amount to people being treated fairly. And one of the things I really want to touch on is I have some definitions that I use in my work with my clients and with students, and how we can better define these terms. And once we understand the meaning behind them, then we can best address it and also redress it in terms of how the government is trying to come back and say these things are unconstitutional, or I think their language is illegal when you're looking at their executive orders. So for example, what I want to touch on is DEI. And here's how I sum up diversity, the D in DEI. It just is. Diversity just is, right? I have 2 bougie Australian Labradoodles that are a mix of 3 different dogs to make them look like Fozzie the bear. We have all this variation in trees and in grass, all of these differences, right? And then we get to people, and what we say is, we want you to be this way, this one way, because if you are too different, it makes me feel uncomfortable. It makes me feel inferior. It doesn't make me feel safe, right? All of these things, it really is putting it back on the person with this perceived power or real power in a lot of cases. So this idea of fairness really comes into play with this administration in particular, because what they're saying is it is unfair that DEI has been illegal. It's unfair. DEI is racist and sexist language. Civil rights legislation, we know that it was enacted to protect women, to protect gay, lesbian, queer people, trans people, to protect Black people, to protect people with disabilities. We know that these things had to be enacted because those groups, me being a part of some of those groups, have been historically marginalized, have been historically pushed out. When you think of the margins, we're not in the center. We are not centered in the system that has been built in this country. And I might be preaching to the choir, y'all. We should know this. And if you don't, okay, we're going to sit there and have a conversation. But this administration is trying to whitewash everything and bully and bulldoze and get rid of these policies that were intended to look at the systemic inequalities that have been happening since the founding or before the founding of this country, to start trying to level the playing field. But here we are all these years later, and it's still not level. Any data point will show you that. As a school psychologist, we are data-informed decision makers, and you could put up any data point. So when you're looking at poverty, But couple that with poverty and being Black, and you're going to have less favorable outcomes. Couple that with being Black and queer and being a youth, and particularly Pennsylvania, across the nation, you are more likely to die by suicide. These are things that are real in our community that we don't want to name. So when we want to take on a colorblind lens and approach, as this current administration is saying, and I quote from his inaugural address, he said, "We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based." So this really speaks to the myth of meritocracy. I can't believe I said something that was CRT related, right? But myth of meritocracy really is speaking to the foundations of critical race theory and how we think this society is colorblind. But this idea that you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps, that the American dream is that anyone can come here and be successful, is not true. You have to overcome a lot of barriers and hurdles, particularly if you have different intersecting identities that are not valued in the society. And it really reminds me of the quote by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., where he said, "It's all right to tell a man to lift himself up by his own bootstraps, but it is cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps." And this is what this myth of meritocracy is about. So when the administration is like, we're going to forge a society that's colorblind and merit-based, what they're alluding to is that these differences that we have that have been socially constructed, right? Race is a social construct. It is not real. Poverty is a result of the systems that are in place, this capitalist society that disadvantages a lot of us so that 1% can hold the wealth. These are things that the myth expands upon, and it amplifies to let you know that it's not true. We like to think that it is. And that really goes to this idea of equality. And Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King talked about that. He wanted us all to be equal. And that is literally a vision. It's not the reality. It's something that we aspire to be. But in order to get there, we have to identify and name the systems that are in place that are preventing us from fully realizing that dream. And that really goes into justice. And how I define that with my clients is justice is the vision of everyone reaching their full potential by ensuring society is physically, psychologically, and socially safe for all people. Social justice involves social actors. That is important, y'all. So when you get to justice, which is what we usually like to leave out, we'll dabble in diversity. We like doing that. We like having the cultural potlucks or the Black History Months or whatever else any other month is that will celebrate you for a day or a week or a month, and then we'll forget about you the rest of the year. And it's really performative in nature oftentimes. For us, and particularly I'll speak for me as a Black person that has Black History Month in February, and then being a Black woman and then has Women's History Month the next month, I use it as a reclamation and a reaffirmation of who I am. But for a lot of people, the reason that these have to exist is because there's systems in place that keep us pushed out to the margins. We do envision a society where we don't have to just have a special week or month just for us, that this is something foundational and that we understand Black history isn't just for Black people, isn't just something we celebrate for the shortest month of the year. It's something that should be embedded in everything that we do. But we've had to create these holidays, these culturally responsive holidays, because we don't live in a culturally responsive society. So these are things that people like me that experience the harm have pushed to adopt in order to be fully seen, heard, and valued by the large society. So I think it's really important when you think about social justice involves social actors who have a sense of their own agency. So often I'll say in my work that I'm teaching you how to be adults. We tell kids they can do hard things, and then we get to adulthood and we're like, I don't want to talk about that hard stuff. And then we say, oh, we have to have a courageous conversation. But we don't want to talk about dismantling the systems or naming the systems that are in place that are hurting people that we say we care about, that we say we want to be liberal, and that we are colorblind. I don't see color. I don't see you like that. Those are harmful things and ideologies that we have to dismiss. And in particular, thinking about colorblind, because this is a society that the new administration wants to align with, I often recall this quote by Sonia Renee Taylor in her book, The Body is Not an Apology. And she says, the only reason we would need to erase someone's difference is because we still equate difference with danger or undesirability. Rendering difference invisible validates the notion that there are parts of us that should be ignored, hidden, or minimized, leaving in place the unspoken idea that difference is the problem and not our approach to dealing with difference. The only reason we would need to erase someone's difference is because we still equate difference with danger or undesirability. Rendering difference invisible validates the notion that there are parts of us that should be ignored, hidden, or minimized, leaving in place the unspoken idea that difference is the problem and not our approach to dealing with difference. It's even how we name difference. Again, thinking about Toni Morrison's how we other people. That is the problem. It is not difference, because going back to the definition of diversity that I gave you, it just is. You can't do anything about it. It's beautiful. And it's how God designed us. And we as human beings are trying to put people into these boxes and sorting them to make us feel more comfortable. And what we have done is created a society of division and divide, which is also what the other party is saying, is that it's divisive, it's dividing people. But what they're really speaking to is that it's making those with the privilege and power to not think about systems uncomfortable. And because of my identity being a Black woman, somehow it is okay, and what I've been conditioned to believe, and those who have the privilege and power to not think about it, they push that off on us and say it's an us issue, or that's just how it is, or you should be grateful for what you get. And I'm trying to recall another quote. I think it's Malcolm X when he's talking about demanding things that we should already have something because we're human. That's not progress. But in this fight and in this backlash of DEI, what they're really speaking to is that y'all should be happy with these breadcrumbs y'all got, right? And we have conditioned ourselves a lot of the time to believe that, well, it could be worse. Or I could be living in this other country where I couldn't practice my religion. That might also be true. But it also is an escapist thing to think that if we live in this society, we should just be grateful for what we get. Or we've come so far from the civil rights movement. Look at us now. And again, thinking we don't look at the trajectory. We don't look at the 400 years of slavery and then civil rights, and that this is a very new country. And thinking about, was it 1974 or around there where the Fair Equal Housing Act was passed? That is very recent. I think that was Will Smith that might have talked about that, or someone was referencing Will Smith in that he was that last generation that still had some of this apartheid and this segregation that was going on. So really long way to say, these are harmful ideologies that we have to really understand and disrupt. And part of that, going back to thinking about equity and equality, is equality is giving everyone the same thing. That's beautiful. That's great, right? We should all have fresh running water, which is something that we'll talk about. But that's also not the case in this country. So we're not even doing that, the bare minimum. But equity means giving everyone what they need to thrive. So the definition that I use for equity is based in part on adapted from Kellogg's. They used to have a really great racial equity. I think it was some language similar to that with amazing definitions. So it's partially adapted from that. And how I define it is equity means giving people what they need to succeed by identifying and removing barriers that prevent fairness, while creating policies and enacting practices that ensure outcomes are not just predictive by identity or demography. So again, thinking about data, thinking about me as a Black woman, thinking about some of the things that Serena Williams even brought to light. We think, oh, anyone can make it, anyone can succeed, right? Think about Serena Williams, arguably the best athlete of all times, right? Hands down for tennis. Such a phenomenal athlete. and what she experienced was she almost died giving birth to her child. And if we look at data, the maternal rate for women dying in childbirth for Black women is astronomically high. And why is that? So being that perpetual toddler and asking why are Black women in particular dying at alarming rates in the United States, more than any other country, and it's supposed to be the best country on earth, right? If we take away DEI and we want to look at things through a colorblind lens, we will miss that very important data point. It is so important to disaggregate data. And in my work, I talk to a lot of people about this, and I'll say, have you disaggregate the data looking at race or gender or class or any other identity group? And they'll usually say, well, we could. And I'll say, well, why haven't you? And then they just stare at me because they know when they disaggregate the data, what it's going to show. So that is what equity is about. We know, me as a Black woman, the likelihood of me dying in childbirth is astronomically higher than my white female counterpart. We know this. It's deeply known in our community. It should be, but we are not doing anything about it. So these are the things, and these are the ways that it's harmful when we think about a colorblind society. And then the other definition, just quickly, so knowing that equity is about fairness and also about creating policies and enacting practices, it's how we move. And justice is about being a social actor. You have to do something, put some skin in the game. This is no more of, I'm still learning. We're done learning. You need to be an adult and we need to move to action, right? So keep those things in mind in this backlash of DEI and the harmful rhetoric, and thinking about how they're playing oppression Olympics and saying, I'm actually the one as a white cisgender man that is being harmed by these illegal policies, as they're saying, for DEI. And if you can say that, think about the power and privilege it takes to say something like that when there's no data to support that, right? Where white cisgender men still maintain the majority of the wealth in this country, the power, all of these things, even when they are nowhere near the global majority. So these things are really important to think about. If they are attacking that, what is the why behind them attacking that? So I think about that in 1619, and I actually have my book here, Nicole Hannah Jones, which she signed, y'all. You see my tabs? See, here we are with the tabs again. This is the book I was talking about before when my friend said, what page didn't you tab? Hater. Listen, it's so helpful. Also signed. I don't know if y'all can see that. To Amber, and such a beautiful signature. Way better than mine. My kids say my signature looks like a piece of hair. But I want to share something with you, thinking about this oppression Olympics and how history is so important and the tactics that are used to dismantle all of the hard work from historically marginalized people that we have built to belong, to be fully included, which is a part of that I is inclusion, that I can be authentically who I am in all of my spaces. We had to create policies and practices for that because it wasn't happening, because there's systems in place to disrupt that. But I want to just quickly look at what they say in 1619 under the democracy. I think this is the first chapter. And thinking about oppression Olympics again, thinking about how one group who maintains the wealth and power will say, no, we are the ones that are being harmed by these illegal practices that are equitable in nature. So they say here, yet in making the argument against Britain's tyranny, so they're talking about the colonies when they were forming, when they were fleeing from Britain under their tyranny, and one of the colonists' favorite rhetorical devices was to claim that they were the slaves to Britain. So it says, one need not delve far into the literature of the Revolution to find out that of all words, the one that persistently, most contentiously, and most flexibly drove the era's rhetorical engine was slavery. And that was written by Peter A. Dorsey, a scholar of literature of the American Revolution and common bondage. And it goes on to say, George Washington in 1774 argued of the British that those from whom we have a right to seek protection are endeavoring by every piece of art and despotism to fix the shackles of slavery upon us. how powerful it is to use the language knowing that how wrong and abhorrent it was, how savage it was to enact slavery in this country. And then you turn around and say, ooh, let's use that language to show that we actually are the victims. Fast forward to today. So just take that nugget with you and think about, this is a game as old as time, where we have played this game in our society about who is a true victim, the oppression Olympics. And it's all smoke and mirrors, y'all. It's all smoke and mirrors. Think about if they can pass this, if they can hold on to this, if they can get people to believe this, who wins? Meanwhile, we're all losing. And later in 1619, and something that is so true, this idea of social construction of slavery and social construction of race to continue to drive it, is that if I can say that I am actually being harmed, and I can create this distance between me and a Black person, enslaved person, I still, even if I'm being harmed by the system, that I have now been forced to say that this is just how it is, at least I'm still white. So at least I still have some power and privilege over you. And that is harmful, y'all. So think about Toni Morrison. How strong really are you if me kneeling makes you tall? So these are the things that we have to think about, the systems of oppression that are in place and have been in place to make some of us small. And we have to continue our social consciousness raising to raise up a next generation that, one, doesn't internalize that feeling of being small and inferior, understands that there's a system that's maintaining it, that is maintained by people that have bought into it. And what it's doing is dehumanizing the people that buy into it, thereby dehumanizing us. So super unhealthy. Okay. So as you'll see in this segment, I wanted to get that out the way because it's really important to think about how they define fairness and how they say equity, or how they use equality. And we really need to be talking about equity. Equality is the vision. We need to get there. That's through justice, through being social actors and enacting change and taking up their personal agency. But we have to address the systems that are in place. So in order to do that, what we're going to talk about are these justice workers, are these social actors that have taken on their personal agency to change this world for the better and be more inclusive so that everyone belongs, everyone has the basic fundamental needs. And we're going to talk about Mari Copeny, who is better known as Little Miss Flint, but she's now a senior in high school and all. I think she started when she was just 8 years old, advocating for clean water in Flint, Michigan. Katherine Johnson is our ancestor. She was a mathematician. So if you saw Hidden Figures, she was in that movie. I think she graduated from high school at 15. Brilliant. And she was a human computer and helped us get to the moon. Just brilliant. And then Kimberlé Crenshaw, who developed intersectionality, and I will walk Emma through what intersectionality is. So these are people we're going to talk about with Emma, and really insightful things that she says when I pose these questions to her. And I just really appreciate this time with her, and I appreciate y'all listening because she's 10. And the level of insight that she has at 10 from her 10-year-old vocabulary and the way she thinks about the world is so liberating and so healing for me as her mother. The other day, she was talking to her dad who's traveling on the phone, and he says, "You're answering some really deep questions, Emma." And I love that he acknowledged that she's doing that because it affirms her and her level of criticality and thinking, and that we will think that kids can't speak to this or have no place, or we have no place to talk to them about this. But I'm telling you, I encourage you to continue to ask your students, your family members, the youth, these questions. Ask yourself these questions. Create that spatial awareness. Give yourself that pause to think deeply about some of these things that have been maintained in our society. And the more that we can grapple with them and unpack them and unlearn that, the better off we'll be. And the better off we'll get this language to be able to combat it and be able to get a clearer vision of what it is that we really want. And I will tell you, you will learn that from people that have been pushed out to the margins, that we are the visionaries. We are the dreamers. We freedom dream like no one else because the world will tell us everything that we're not. And we are here today. We are a manifestation of saying, you are lying. I deserve to be here. So thinking about ancestors' wildest dreams, that is us in the flesh, y'all. So Speaking of ancestors' wildest dreams, I know my ancestors are beaming down, looking at my little girl, Emma, as she tackles these challenging topics from her perspective and her heart. So I hope you enjoy this segment today as Emma and I unpack fairness.
It's me, it's me, it's me. It's me, it's me, it's me. Hey, it's me, Emma. Welcome back to Living in 3D Power, and today we are going to be doing my fourth trait, fairness.
Fairness, such an important trait, and VIA survey defines this under the umbrella of virtue, which means treating others with fairness, advocating for equality. And the question I want to ask you as we open this up is, why do you think fairness is important, not just for you, but for the whole community?
I think fairness is important because a lot of people don't get the help or respect that they need. So you gotta be fair to them.
Yeah, and that helps. You're not just thinking about yourself, right? Mm-hmm. You're thinking about how this helps the whole community, which I think is an important distinction when you're thinking about the current administration and how a lot of it, if not all of it, trying to find where it is for the community, mm-hmm. is really selfish. And I think something you said earlier when we were talking, you were talking about being a bully. They're really in it for themselves. So they're not thinking about the community. And part of community is thinking about the generation. So you being a generation behind me, I have to think about, the older people have to think about what kind of legacy and what kind of world do I want to leave for you? So you're a part of our community and you're going to carry this forward when I'm gone. So community has to be really important to us, and we can't just focus on community of people that is going to harm another group of people. That's not community. So Martin Luther King Jr. talked about the beloved community, and that's what we are going to work towards. And we're going to find more people that align with us in saying we want to work towards making sure that everyone can walk in their fullness and be seen and be safe and be whole. That's the goal. Okay, so we have three amazing figures today that we're going to focus on. And remember, we do child, we do ancestor, and then we do present day, all Black women and girls. The first person that we're going to focus on is the child. She's a senior in high school now, but she started this work when she was she 8? 8 seems to be like the magic number. I think she was 8. I think that's in my notes. But who is the child figure we're going to focus on today? What is her name?
Mari Copeny.
Yes, so she is better known as Little Miss Flint, but she prefers to go by Mari because even though she catapulted herself into fame because she spoke truth to power, and y'all can't see this, but on our slideshow here, we have a picture of Mari. I think this is from Teen Vogue magazine. Most recently, I think maybe last year she did this article, but we also have a picture of her from the viral post she did when she held up a sign when she was 8 years old saying, Flint, Michigan has been without clean water since April 24th, 2014. Now we're almost 11 years to the date of that. And guess what, Emma? They still don't have clean drinking water.
Tis.
How frustrating is that, right? She does this viral thing. She does all this work to lend her voice to say we deserve better because what's happening in Flint is there are pipes, so your water has to run through these pipes to get out of the faucet. The pipes are rusting, they're decomposing, and what happens is there's lead in the water. And we know, especially in school psychology and education, that if you're exposed to lead in childhood, it could lead to learning disabilities. So they're finding all these issues. And I think one time she said at this age in 2014, she was taking a bath and the water didn't look differently, but it smelled different. And it smelled bad and to the point where their eyes were burning. So you know if your eyes are burning, that can't be safe, right, for you to bathe and let alone drink. And there was just a video that she posted on her Instagram page a couple of days ago where someone had a water bottle and they poured the water out and the water in the bottle was brown. Almost 11 years later. So what is the quote that we have here from Little Miss Flint, better known as Mari?
You gotta really use your voice and you gotta be serious. You really gotta stand on business and lock in.
So she's speaking to you, not just to you, but she's speaking to me too, because I believe even the youth can teach us something, right? And that's what she's doing. And this article was really fascinating because she's talking about, she was speaking truth, and a lot of older people, a lot of old heads were telling her to be quiet, and they were frustrated by her. And even online, she was getting targeted and harassed by adults when she was speaking out and doing what's right. So think about how frustrating it is when you're speaking truth and you're naming things that are wrong in the world, and people are telling you to shut up and stay in a child's place. That is harmful, right? And there's a lot of that going on in this administration. So like you said earlier, bully people to keep them silent, but that keeps us from moving in the right direction of justice and fairness for all. So thinking about this, her efforts were to raise awareness, and it brought attention to the fact that her city couldn't meet one of the most basic needs. And we've talked about this before. I remember we were naming basic needs, and you said clean water. So they don't even have the basic need of clean water in Flint, Michigan. In America, I remember growing up when I didn't eat all my food, Graham would say, you know, there's starving children in Africa. And guess what? That is true. And guess what's also true? There's starving children right here, right? So we often think about that's happening somewhere else, but she was bringing attention to a national and an issue that's happening in our own backyard, okay? So thinking about, she has this strength, just like you, of justice. And why do you think it's important for people like Mari to keep fighting for change, even when things take a long time to come to fruition? So this is almost 11 years. Why do you think it's so important to keep fighting?
I think it's important to keep fighting because even if it doesn't work, if you keep on fighting, it might work, because if you try and keep on trying, people might hear you.
People might hear you, and then also people might believe you, and people might want to support you. So you build that community, that beloved community, to fight for justice and fairness. And I also think what it helps do when you keep fighting, so say you stop fighting, there's a part of you, I call it like you die inside, because then you're not being true to yourself. You're letting a part of you go silent and quiet, something that you were really passionate about. There's a part of you that dies inside because there's something that was put in your spirit to fight for that. Mm-hmm. And so if you no longer are fighting for that, then you're not being true to yourself, and you're not doing the work that you were put on this earth to do. So think of how many of us are in this society that are just being numb to things that we were once passionate about because the world fights against us, adults that should be helping children to make a better and more inclusive culture, fighting against it. And that can be really dehumanizing, so meaning that it's really harmful, it doesn't really show the human spirit. But it's important to find community, because when you do it alone, that's the most devastating part, because you're the one getting targeted and there's no one there to buffer you and protect you. But she built a whole community, and she has an amazing mom, an amazing community supporting her in this efforts. So we are definitely shouting her out today, because she's a child who's doing amazing work, and she's going to go on to do amazing things as a future and a current leader in the society. So also some other details about her. In 2022, she received the Billboard Music Awards Changemaker Award, and she became the youngest person in history to receive that award. Also, she's partnered with organizations, and I think the organization is HydroVive. So she created her own line of water filters, so they can put them on the filters in their house, so the spigots or the faucets in their house, so they can get filtered clean water in Flint, Michigan. So they're giving those away to families in need, which I think is awesome. So here's the thing about power of the people, that we can't wait on the government to do what's right for us, that we have always done what is right, particularly Black people in society, that we have fought against the government and said, this is not right, this is unfair, we're going to build a coalition, we're going to build a community, and we're going to fight. So power to the people is where that comes from. Mm-hmm. So this is what she's doing. She took it upon herself. She reached out, and someone partnered with her to build their own water filter system. And you would think that Flint, Michigan would solve that issue. The government has the power to do that, right? Yeah. Why haven't they done it? So why does she have to find other methods to do that? That's frustrating, but she found a way. And also, she really, her biggest thing in the community is she gives away toys for the holidays and a back-to-school book pack event. So awesome, Mari Copeny, Little Miss Flint. Okay, so now we're going to move on to one of our ancestors. And who is that?
Katherine Johnson.
So we have some books about Katherine Johnson. So let's get our books. That one over here. And you have, again, the beautiful book, A Young, Gifted, and Black. And I have Black Heroes, 51 Inspiring People from Ancient Africa to Modern Day USA. And this is by Dr. Arlisha Norwood, a Black history book for kids. And if you haven't checked out our last episode, who is the author of this book again? I know the author is Jamia Wilson, and the illustrator is Andrea Pippins. So Young, Gifted, and Black. And they have 52 in there, and we have 51 in here. So almost one a week and one a week in there. So what did they say in Young, Gifted, and Black about Katherine Johnson?
She was a physicist and a mathematician, and she calculated the flight path to the first American mission to space.
Which was this race to space. I think it was us and I think back then it was USSR, Russia. The first country was going to go to space was going to be number one in the whole globe. So it was this race to space, and they used her calculations to help them to get there. So this is a Black woman in 1958. She became part of a team doing calculations that would help send people into space. Her skills not only made the early space mission successful, but many times she was responsible for plotting the land of space shuttles, keeping astronauts safe when they returned to Earth. That's super important. Can you imagine all those calculations she had to do? She graduated high school at the age of 14. And then she went on to West Virginia State University, and she graduated magna cum laude, which is the highest level that you can graduate with the mathematics and French degree. So brilliant woman, born in 1918 and died in 2020. And here's the thing. Remember we watched the film Hidden Figures? And remember they had to be in a separate room, a segregated room, to do all these calculations, and they couldn't be with the white men. So they called them human computers. So this is back before we had the computers, the laptops, the iPads that we have today. They were checking the male engineers' calculations. These Black women were checking the male engineers' calculations, which I think is also powerful because what you know what that does? It disproves the myth that we are inferior and that we are stupid, right? Because we were literally doing calculations, checking white men's calculations to launch to space and get us back from space safely. Can you imagine that? So they actually say in this book, NASA officials relied on Katherine's accuracy. She was essential to Apollo 11, United States' first mission to the moon. Though NASA had started to use electronic computers, they still wanted Katherine to check the calculations. Astronaut John Glenn insisted on it. So she was that amazing and that thorough that they didn't even trust the computerized calculations. They still want her to check it. So who's saying that we're inferior? Right? That disproves and blows that out of the water. She was a genius. And a quote here she said was, "Some things will drop out of the public eye and will go away, but there will always be science, engineering, and technology, and there will always be mathematics." So she absolutely loved math. And I think what this is also really important is that she's a woman, she's a Black woman who loved mathematics and science in a world that's telling girls that they shouldn't be focusing on that we need to do things that are less challenging for us. So I love that she followed her passion because they wanted her to be, especially back then, what was it, a nurse or a teacher? That's usually the profession that most women, particularly Black women, we were teachers. And she's like, I don't want to be that. And she fought against where they tried to put her in that box and became a phenomenal woman who helped us get to the moon. So kudos to Katherine Johnson. So the question I want to ask you is, she wasn't asking for special treatment. She was asking for a fair chance. And even thinking about special treatment, even in the film, where they were segregated, where they couldn't do things, and they had to go all the way across. Remember, she had to run and use the bathroom, and it was all the way across. It didn't make any sense. And they finally put a bathroom in so she could use the bathroom where she needed to use the bathroom because she's a human being. So thinking about those little basic things, but in a broader sense of what's going on right now in the country, why do you think people today, people meaning the administration, act like fairness for some means unfairness for others?
I think that people want all the power and attention on one group and not the other group, because if another person gets more attention than them, then they will have to get the attention back, and they want the attention to be all on them.
Ooh, I mean, I feel like you should just drop your mic, but don't drop the mic, right? They want the attention. And another word for attention is power. They want all the power. In psychology and adult education, we call this scarcity mindset, where we think if someone else is getting something, it means that I'm not getting enough. So we talk about America being as a pie and you want one slice of the pie. We think someone is holding the pie and I own this pie and I'm going to give you one little sliver, but I can't give you too much because then it's going to take away from what I have. And what we're saying is there's enough pie for everyone. The system that's been built, though, doesn't allow us to have enough to share, which is why we have people that are experiencing homelessness and food insecurity, because we've created a system that's unfair. So we're not asking for special treatment. We're just asking for equity and justice, right? So I love that. Okay. And so the last figure is present day figure. I actually, you know what, y'all, fact check me on this because I know people call her Dr. Kimberlé Crenshaw, but she is a lawyer and on GAG is a lawyer. And I know she'll say that's a Juris Doctorate. So that's a terminal degree, meaning that when you're in certain positions, that's the highest degree you can attain. So for me, I could get a doctorate because of the field that I'm in. But some people, that's the highest degree. So a JD is a Juris Doctorate. But we still call her Dr. Kimberlé Crenshaw because she is that woman. Okay, so Dr. Kimberlé Williams Crenshaw, there's a quote here that I just recently saw from a 2024 Ebony acceptance speech that she received for the Humanitarian Award for Ebony Power 100. And I'm going to read this quote. And I quote, it says, "If we are able to pass on to our future generations the precious legacies that were passed on to our parents and that were passed on to their parents, it will be because of our institutions, our families, our media, our colleges, our organizations, and our churches that loved us enough to honor our unique story, our voice, our creativity, and our wisdom. It is this that will carry us and our nation through." So when she's saying our, she's in Ebony is a magazine dedicated to Black people. She's talking about we have always had our own institutions, our own churches, our own communities that have uplifted us.
Yes.
And that must continue. So in all of this divisiveness and tearing people apart, we are going to band together, continue to build that community because that is what we've always stood on. And that's our ancestry. Remember last time you said, it's in my blood, it's running through your veins. So keeping that sense of pride that we have always known who we are, that we are powerful, that we are resilient, that we belong is something that is inherent in us. So I have a book that is called This Book is Anti-Racist, 20 Lessons on How We Wake Up, Take Action, and Do the Work by Tiffany Jewell and illustrated by Ariella Durand. I hope I'm saying that right. And they actually have, y'all probably can't see that from the camera, but they actually have Dr. Kimberlé Crenshaw in here, and it's talking about her work with intersectionality. Big word, but what they say is looking at intersectionality helps us to understand how our identities affect our whole life. Kimberlé Crenshaw, a Black female lawyer, author, and scholar, and civil rights activist, used the term intersectionality in 1989 to help us better understand that being a woman and Black created greater disadvantages than just being a woman. So she did really pivotal work back in the day when she was helping out a woman that happened to be a Black woman in this case, and she was trying to say, I'm experiencing racism and sexism. So people are targeting me in the workplace because I am a woman, but I'm also Black. And when she went to court and defended her, the judge is like, you can't do that because we have women that have that position or that are being successful, and we have Black men that are being successful. And Kimberlé was like, but she's both of those things. And if you happen to be a woman and you happen to be Black, you have more unfair disadvantages. So she coined the term intersectionality. So you think about an intersection when you're in a street. So thinking about us as Black women and girls, if I'm going down a road and there could be cars coming at me, I'm more able, okay, I can maybe dodge the car. I'm thinking about a video game. You can dodge that. But if you have another car coming at you this direction, how much harder is it going to be? Very hard. So at that intersection of being Black and then being a woman, there could be a collision. And the more intersections that you have about different identities that the society doesn't think are valuable, the more likely you are to be harmed. So that's how she came up with this term intersectionality. And it's such a helpful concept, and I use it a lot in my dissertation and the work I do now, because this world, this society was not built to uphold our racial identity. So we have to do things like justice and fairness and equity to make sure that we're not being harmed in the process in a system that doesn't work out for us, right? So this is the work that she does every day. So thinking about her amazing work that she does, what are some ways we can help make sure Black girls don't get left out of opportunities?
Make sure that if you see someone bullying us, make sure you act and don't just sit there. And if they are feeling bad about themselves, you got to be nice to them.
You got to do something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the most lonely feeling is that when you know someone's harming you because of one of your identities, and say you tell someone about that and they don't believe you, you feel alone, right? You feel, what it makes you do is makes you think that, is there something wrong with me? Maybe it's me. Maybe there's something wrong with me and I'm being too sensitive. So sometimes when people tell a trusted adult or tell someone that they think cares about them, and they say, oh, you took it the wrong way, or the kids are just being kids, it's not that serious. That is really hurtful and harmful. So telling someone, or if you know someone saw something and they ignored it, that's also very harmful. So you're saying you have to act. Be a full human being, have compassion, see that I have a different experience than you because I happen to be a Black girl. And sometimes people are not going to treat me fairly because they don't see me the way that I see me, because we're not going to change the way that we see ourselves. It's not my fault that you don't want to see the awesomeness that I am. But also, I'm not going to tolerate that. Mm-hmm. And I need you as an adult, someone that's supposed to care about me, to step in and say that's not right and name it for what it is. Yeah. Don't just say, oh, they were bullying. If it was racist, then let's call it racist. So we like to shy away from certain terms because it makes people uncomfortable to say what it really is. But we have to name what it is. And that's what Dr. Kimberlé Crenshaw does. And what she also does, she advocates doing her campaign, Say Her Name, which is a really important campaign. I think she started that in 2014. So thinking about police brutality or the ways that Black men in society have been harmed by police, what she's saying is there's also women that have been hurt and we forget about them. So we need to say their names. Breonna Taylor, right? We need to say her name. Sandra Bland. These are women we have to talk about and say their names so we don't ever forget. And we also have to protect our Black women and Black girls. And she's leading the way in that movement, and which I think is so important, particularly for us as Black women, because sometimes we get forgotten. So as we wrap up here, I want to ask you the final question. So Mari Copeny, Katherine Johnson, and Dr. Kimberlé Crenshaw, they all fought for fairness in different ways. Mari was clean water. Katherine Johnson was wanting fair treatment and belonging in NASA. And Dr. Crenshaw was looking at the intersection of being a woman or a girl and also race and how they shape our experiences. So how are those lessons, how do they help you think about fairness differently and seeing how you have to stand up for yourself and others in your own life?
To act if you see someone being racist to someone.
And you named it, right? If you're being racist or sexist, so to act on it. Don't just stand there and be silent. Build a community, build a coalition. And also with Dr. Crenshaw, she's building systems in place so that if you don't have a system in place to be able to name it, then you can't fight against it. So that's why all this administrative stuff is happening, to erase our history, because if they erase the history, then we don't have the tools and the systems and the infrastructure in place to fight against it. So we're going to keep our history, we're going to keep our legacy, and we're going to fight because we belong here and we're going to be okay. All right? So what are your parting words for our listeners today as we wrap up?
Bye.
All right, and welcome back. I mean, the child dropped some truth nuggets today, and I just want to re-quote her because I loved these quotes when I asked her questions. So thinking about Mari Copeny, thinking about Little Miss Flint, and that she's fighting for safe drinking water almost 11 years now in Flint, Michigan. Come on now. But what Emma said was, I think it's important to keep fighting because even if it doesn't work, if you keep on fighting, it might work because if you try and keep on trying, people might hear you. And there's a sense of determination, a perseverance that has to come from that. And the opposite of that is why people get weary, because again, these systems are in place to tire us out. We're seeing that in real time right now. And if you're paying attention to any of this and following people that are uplifting you, they're saying, pay attention. This is the tactic to drown us out, to wear us out, to keep us in the chaos. This is muzzle velocity, as Steve Bannon, who was in his first administration, talked about. This is what you do. You fire it all at them at once that we can't pay attention to everything that's going on. So who knows what they're doing behind the scenes, because we're so focused and the media is just blitzing us with everything that's going on. Muzzle velocity, that is exhausting us. And what happens is we get so exhausted that we just say, I'm tapped out. I can't engage. I have to maintain my peace. So how do we experience the tension of both of those things? How do we stay informed enough so that we know what's going on, that we have a sense of agency, remember, getting to justice, that we can be social actors, and that we can develop a personal agency for change? This muzzle velocity, these agents of chaos are in place to make sure that we stay dormant. And it's worked. And I think about Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's sermon on Rip Van Winkle and how he just slept through the revolution, right? So we are not going to sleep through this revolution. What do we need to do to fortify ourselves? That's community, y'all. That is making sure we're eating properly, that we're resting properly, that we are practicing our spiritual practices, that we are coming back to center in a world filled with chaos. We don't lose our way. So thinking about we are going to persist and we can keep fighting. And I also think about the fight gets tired. So how do we not focus on what we're against? That we have a very clear enemy. Like, this is the name of the game in the society. It's like, who's the enemy? Who's enemy number one? And attack, attack, attack. And how do we come back to ourselves and what we were designed to do and create community and be in community and be loving and not go about what we're fighting against and what are we here for? What am I here for? Not what I'm against. And the more that we can focus on what am I here for, something most basic and fundamental to being a human being is to love. So when we see so much hate around us, it throws us off kilter because that's not what we were designed to do. And it expends so much energy to do that as well, too, right? So how do we get to not focusing on what we're against, but what we are for? And that's really Dr. Sean Ginwright's work. I'll put his book in the show notes, and he talks about even the language that we use, fighting against. What are we for? Switching the language to not be enemy number one, but be more centered in who we are as human beings, what we were designed to do. And that's to replicate love. Okay, another thing that Emma said, thinking about Katherine Johnson, who was the brilliant mathematician, this I loved as well. She says, I think that people want all the power and attention on one group and not the other group. Because if another person gets more attention than them, then they will have to get the attention back, and they want the attention to be all on them. My goodness. I'm like, drop that mic, but don't drop that mic. Don't drop that expensive mic. That from a 10-year-old is so insightful about what we see in the media and how certain people or certain somebody doesn't like bad press, doesn't like when the arena isn't filled out. And what I said to her, and she's thinking about attention, I said, another word for that really is power and influence. And think about all these influencers in social media. What's the influence that they have on people when we can create this fake persona of this elite level of power that I want to attain to when I'll never be able to touch that, or this person doesn't give a flip about me, but I see myself because we have the same complexion. I don't know if y'all have that orange complexion, but I'm just saying, if you align and have the same racial identity, you see yourself like there's a mirror there. But this, to me, is not a good mirror. And Emma and I talked about it on maybe the first or second episode. So when she's talking about people want attention, they want to take that we're thinking about that this American pie, this slice, who's holding the pie, and that I have to ask for a little sliver and I should be happy with that little sliver that I got, or even that little tiny morsel. So it makes me think of, was it Christmas Story where Tiny Tim was like, can I have some more, please? And so much of society in this capitalist society is like, can I have some more, please? And the people serving, you the food are like, aren't you satisfied with what you got? And because we've been conditioned to be like, I should be grateful for what I have, and not realizing that your basic fundamental needs aren't even met, and that's inhumane, is such a warped way to think about this world. And we've conditioned ourselves to think about that. But what would happen if we looked at the way the world is and admitted that this isn't the way the world should be, that all of us deserve to be free, all of us deserve to feel safety, all of us deserve to have clean drinking water, like Flint, Michigan deserves to have clean drinking water. And simply because of where I live and the zip code that I live in doesn't mean that, well, we can't help everyone. That is an ideological problem that we have. So thinking about that and what power does. And then lastly, we talked about Kimberlé Crenshaw and intersectionality. And Emma's reflection was, make sure that if you see someone bullying, you act and don't just sit there. And if they are feeling bad about themselves, you got to be nice to them. And I just love that, because Emma's talking about being a social agent of change and leading with compassion and leading with love, which we were designed to do. So it's time for us to be adults. Emma's calling us to more. Your children are calling you to more. This nation's calling us to more. This world is watching and calling us to more. So thinking about how can you look yourself in the mirror and develop the personal agency to do something. What that something is going to look different across the globe from everyone else. But what is your personal responsibility within your sphere of influence? Who are you influential to? Is it your children? Is it your school board? Is it your neighborhood? Is it your family? Is it your church? Is it your synagogue? Who do you have influence over, and how can you take that next small step to envision a world where we can all be liberated and free? That is the goal. When I look at Emma, I'm more resolute than ever to create that, because I have a legacy. And when I leave this earth, I want to make sure that my baby girl and her babies, if she so chooses, will be safe. We'll feel a little bit more free. We'll have this liberated idea about who they fully are, and that can envision a world where they can just be. Instead of being hypervigilant, instead of always thinking about, is that person looking at me, or they're saying this about me, or I'm unsafe because of my identities, you can simply exist. And some of us have the privilege in this country and in this world to not have to think about our identities, to not have to look over a shoulder, to not have to worry about if I made a face or I'm not smiling enough, or people want to think I'm an angry Black woman. That's me. I'm raising my hand, y'all. Sometimes when I'm over smiling, I'm like, why are you smiling so much, Amber? Because I want to feel less threatening to people, because I'm saying something that's really hard and challenging, and my directness gets misinterpreted as angry. There's a level of hypervigilance and exhaustion that comes from that, racial battle fatigue. Maybe we'll talk about that in another episode. But for all of us to just simply be, to invite in more ease in our life. And ease not meaning that we're ignoring the systems, but thinking about how do we dismantle some of these systems, dismantle all of the systems, so that we can live a life of ease. And that if I can't see it in my generation, I'm going to do my part to make sure that the next generation does. And it's going to be that ripple effect. And that I can know when my time here is done, that I have done my part, and I did not be Rip Van Winkle. I did not sleep through the revolution. So wake up, y'all. What can you do to wake up your neighbor, your spouse, your partner, your children, your parents, your people in your community? What can you do to wake up and not go back to sleep? We're not going back to sleep, y'all. We are awake and we are in the revolution. So I hope that you enjoyed this episode on fairness. I hope it makes you think, that you are resolute and you are leaning in, because we tell kids they can do hard things. And guess what? Adults can do hard things too. And we have a responsibility, and we have the agency and the spirit of influence to do it. Don't ever think you don't, because 8-year-old Mari did, and she started a revolution. So what can we do at 43? That's my age. What can you do at 83? What can you do at 13, at 33? We all can do something. So on that note, I hope you go to our YouTube channel at Living in 3D Power, or subscribe to our Substack. So either one, if you go on Substack, you will see the full episode. If you're watching me, hey. In this episode in particular, you'll get to see that one lock that was sticking straight up that Emma didn't tell me about, y'all. I mean, the whole darn video. But, locks sometimes do what they want to do, and I'm just going to embrace it. And Spotify, Apple Music, all the things, please like, review, leave a comment, follow for more. Let's build this community together, y'all. We are waking up. We are staying awake for the great revolution. Take care.